I did an entire revision, a city comment revision, like in Bluebeam as a PDF markup.
I actually remember that. I remember thinking, are they going to accept this? And they did.
Bluebeam magic.
Speaking of magic, welcome to season 2, episode 2. We are Permit Zip. Kenny here with Carter. We try to make engineering accessible to small projects. On our website, check out the instant quote. Let us know how we can make it easier for you. We are here to talk about some fun things today. Design is the season's theme, and this one will be interesting. The perspective Chris brings in his former role as a GC, now into the tech world. Let's begin there. How was that transition?
Oh, it's been interesting. I mean, I think the best part about today is I think you guys brought me here because, you know, I'll expose any dirty little secrets you want because I don't work for the GC anymore. It doesn't matter.
Got the inside guy.
Yeah, right.
So we can talk about how the sausage is made and stuff that people aren't supposed to see.
Yeah, we like talking about sausage.
All right, that'll do it for today's episode.
Anyway, thanks for tuning in.
I think the next thing I've got to disclose here to my boss, my wife, and my doctor is I don't normally drink at 11:30 on a Tuesday, right? It's a special occasion, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you guys having me, though.
Hey, they don't know what time it is. It's actually 3 o'clock right now. We're good.
Perfect. I like it.
Yeah, we're shooting this at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Off the clock.
We've been talking a lot lately about coordination. We went through a claim. Somebody wanted $500,000 from us for a design that we didn't even do. And as we settle that out, we're almost there. I've invited the people as a part of that to the podcast to talk about it because I think there's a lot of bullshit in it. But it's been the inspiration to this entire podcast for us. We start with coordination and the fact that in our world, like commercial or like a lot of people call special projects if they're GC or small projects, there's no budget for design, which means you're pinched. And so you can only be limited in what you can provide in terms of service. And you can't just get perfect thought or construction, and all of these things cannot be thought about at the budget that you're being asked for. Essentially, that people say, we just want a real quick permit, just we figure it out. But then if shit hits the fan, that's not what anybody says. They'll say I did it per the drawings, and we were just tired of hearing that.
And there's words that we throw at each other, right? Like you throw means and methods at us at the GC, right? We throw coordination at you guys, and there's all these buzzwords that we just start throwing back and forth at each other.
That's the one everybody hates. But we need to make one based on means and methods too. We've been trying to make this season's about design because we can unpack a lot about that. But I like the idea of one word just to drive the conversations and just you find out how many people see it differently. Coordination was one of those things, like, you know, and then that leads to design. So for me in the ductwork and coordination from an engineering standpoint, especially when you're limited on feet, is I need to talk to you about how you want to use this space. I need to understand the schedule. I need to model this imaginary universe of weather and humans and occupancy and all of these other things so that I can select equipment that will do that will comfort you. So the very end of my thinking is the ductwork. It's completely maybe 1% to 5% when I have a limited budget of how much I think, but it's the entire brain of the I guess for the installer, right? Because it's like pretty much all of their work is installing the ductwork.
Yep.
And so when they say I did per the plans, what they really mean is I did per the picture of the ductwork on the plans,
with no thought to any other trades or anyone else it might impact.
And so it's easy to look bad, and like it's so easy to miss something so obvious as an engineer. Just in hindsight, it's always so obvious that there's a beam here, or we're dealing with a situation where it's like a 9-foot ceiling. And by the time the ductwork gets installed, you got 5 feet clear above the floor. So obviously it wouldn't work, but we're so preoccupied with imaginary space. That's like design to us. So in the construction world, you know, in that GC's role, what is that to you? What is design? You know, I know you guys get involved with value engineering and changing of things and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So there was a, that's an interesting question. So there was a lot of things when we were going through, whether it was a true design build or whether it was a negotiated job where we were just helping this client, you know, work with you guys, work with the architect and get to the final product that they want at a budget they want. And like the first thing that I always notice is every single person would always say, right, like, let's cram everything I want in here and then we'll back it off from there. And, you know, for right or for wrong, the first thing I thought to myself was like, this just means a bunch more work for everyone, right? Because I already know they can't afford everything they're cramming in there.
Mhm.
Bow, 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 bow.
But after a few projects, I think we got pretty good at like boiling things down to lists, right? And so we would get the first iteration on paper, and we would get this budget, whether it was had a bunch of subcontractor input because the drawings were further along, or if it was a napkin sketch and we're just throwing numbers at it, and we would temperature check the budget, right? And it's always, I'm still waiting for the time where they said like, oh, that's too cheap, let's add more, right? It's always
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so then we would start, we would try to like boil down the list, right? So, okay, here we got 15 things here, right? And then the next challenge or opportunity we had to embrace the process was to push people to decisions, right? People don't really like to make decisions. It's hard for people to make decisions.
Yeah.
And so I would try to go down a list in a meeting and say, look, here's what I need, right? I've got this change A, right? And it's got this cost associated with it. And our goal for this meeting is to say, yeah, I love it. Let's do it, right? Go price it to the penny. Like, no chance, cross off the list. Don't ever talk to me about that again. Too big of a compromise. Or the third option is like, hey, Chris, Kenny, Carter, whoever, I need this information from you to make a decision, right? Otherwise, I found we would get stuck in this never ending loop of like, all right, hurry up, let's go. But there's still 12 things that are undecided, and people don't realize you can't go with all that outstanding.
Yeah. It's interesting, the decision stuff, engineers struggle making decisions too, because we want perfect information in order to make the decision. It's partly because of our personality, but also partly because of the responsibility of the decision and the blame that comes along if it's wrong. So we try to follow this rule, the 70% rule. If you have 70% of the information you need to make a decision, educated decision, then it's cheaper to go ahead and make it at the risk of being wrong than to wait for perfect information. I wonder if you are faced with a lot of that.
100% agree. I actually think that working in construction for a general contractor has made me so good in all areas of my life at making decisions with less than 100% information, right? All right. You want me to make the best decision I can with the information I have about, buying this new car, about this repair to my house, I'll go ahead and do it. And she might watch this and get mad at me. It drives my wife's crazy, right? She wants all this information. And
you
I'm
said
like,
wife's plural?
What? No. We can edit that out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of those things. It drives my wife's crazy. They all just
drives my wife crazy.
One of them puts it
And
more
I'm
than
willing.
the other.
I would rather make the decision and live with the consequences
Yeah.
than live in limbo and just be a jellyfish and go where the ocean takes me.
Yeah. The delay is costly, and it's really hard to understand that when we're waiting for information on the design side. Oh, we have a project where there's a pool and we're waiting for answers from somebody specifically on what they're doing in the pool. It's like, guys, look, just tell them how you're approaching it and just say, I'm going to approach it because I can't get answers. I'm going to approach it like this, which means that. Are you good with that?
Yep.
That means you'll be expecting. I make these assumptions and things turn out differently, then I'm going to charge you to redesign. But right now, if I don't move forward right now, you'll never have a permit. You'll never start building. Nothing gets done.
That's the same way we would approach like our subcontractors as a GC when we were getting that pricing off of, whatever you want to call them, 50% sets or whatnot. I would tell them, and some of them were so good at it, right? And some of them, they just didn't get it. They would want the answer to every single question. And I would say, if you just make whatever assumptions you want, just make it crystal clear that you're making this assumption.
Yeah.
And we'll be fine. And it's helpful because then I can go back and say, yeah, A, B, and C are good. I need you to change D, E, and F, assumptions to this, because this is what we have to do.
Yeah. There's a lot of decision making, difficult for engineers.
We're especially bad at it.
Yeah.
I mean, even us, we just recently kind of got over that hump, because we want everything to be perfect aligned. It's like most people just want to get it in for permit, get things rolling, and they really don't mind like even paying extra to have a change down the road.
Yeah. I mean, it's all cost driven, right? At the end of the day, 90% of projects, right, are probably cost is the biggest driver. And it's so hard because we get stuck in this loop of like, Kenny, just draw something, right? Yeah. And then the owner's like, why aren't we in for permit yet? And Chris, how much does it cost? And I'm like, how much does what cost?
Yeah.
Right? You mentioned I transitioned into tech, and I mean, I'm sure we'll get to that at some point, but that's actually what drew me. The company I'm with now, Zabel, we take people's cost data and we build out historical cost database, right? It's like the GC's dream. Everybody wants to do it, but no one's at the time. And then through a software, you can kind of make those napkin sketch budgets to help these projects get rolling and document your assumptions and things like that. And so I think it's really cool. And I mean, it drew me to it the first time I saw it, and that's how I ended up there.
Yeah, that's cost is always the question. And also regarding cost, HVAC is always the first cost to be cut, but it's also just, where's the camera at? All y'all out there cutting the HVAC cost, y'all got to recognize, I bet you Chris will confirm, it's also the first thing complained about during the first week of CO. Is that true?
That is true. It's complained about for one of two reasons. One is we cut all the costs out of it, so we put in a split system when we should have like VAVs. Or like the other reason that happens, they don't know how to work the thermostat.
Oh yeah. Shit, man.
Somebody didn't wire it up.
There was a person that we had design engineering for. They're like, oh, what's going on? We don't have the capacity. It's been 2 summers now. And then it turns out that their thermostat wasn't even connected the whole time. It's just always something like that, man. Yeah. And it's always something like that. And it's difficult in the moment. They will always go straight to engineer messed it up in that second. But like suddenly all context goes out the window. The fact that you've cut $100,000 out of your HVAC doesn't matter. Because you still spend a lot of money on it. Even if you cut $100,000, you're still spending $100,000. So somebody's mind, they're like, well, I still spent money, so I should get something. And you're like, well, you actually kind of don't, it's like trying to race with a Geo Metro in the NASCAR or something. You're just never going to compete. You can't, your classification of vehicle doesn't belong in this race. Yeah. It still costs money to buy that car though. You just can't race it. Sorry, you literally wasting your money. So we struggle with that early on. But then when it's an accusation, it always is an accusation. It's like, hey, I need you out in the field. It's not working.
Yep.
And then I'm like, well, first of all, never in my experience has it actually ever been the engineering. And I've been doing this for a long time. It's always a wire not terminated. Yeah. It's always that kind of thing. Or it's always the features that I initially specified were removed from the thing. And now it's not going to be comfortable. So I've learned a lot of little tricks. You can be as comfortable as you can afford. It's not illegal to be uncomfortable. These kind of things, like it's up to you.
Yeah.
How much you want to sweat in the summertime, or transition. You want to how much mold you want to grow inside your walls because you don't have a DOAS that I asked for.
Like a little bit, or you cool with a lot?
Yeah.
Medium amount of mold.
Yeah. just your average amount.
Well, these calls you're talking about, right? They're all taking place when it's done, it's occupied, right? And that's like the work, the GC's moved on, the owner's so done with construction, right? That is what I find, like that's when the finger pointing starts, because no one's got time to truly deal with the problem, right? Everyone's been paid, everyone has moved on, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I would assume that when some sort of issue during installation pops up, right, it's probably a much more productive conversation, right? Somebody probably comes to you and says, hey, this is our problem. Here's one option. Here's 2 options. And everyone's kind of playing fair. Whereas like once it's like CO'd and everyone's moved on to the next project and they're dealing with all those same problems on the next project. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. HVAC guy figure it out. You can't figure it out. Must have been the engineer's fault.
And the owner's got change order fatigue. So it's like, they're just like, so not paying another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's now who's paying for it. And it's just like, first of all, who's paying me to show up on site? Because I don't owe you this debt of service. I'm sure you feel the same way as a GC. Like suddenly do you have to show up out of every accusation? How long do you owe this service to a project to make sure that it's closed out? How often are you in that life, back when you were in that life, did you have to battle? Like, do I show up to solve this? Do I not?
So I think I learned, right, it took a while, but I learned to push back with questions, right? So somebody says, my HVAC is not working, right? And my inclination, especially when I was new to it, is like, oh my God, like let me hop in the car and drive over there, right? And there's only so many times of like, it's July and you've got the thermostat on heat, and you just click it over to cool, or, some sort of user error that I finally started saying, okay, I hear you. Like, is it not blowing? Is it blowing air, but it's not cold? Can you check this? Can you check this? Right. And push because you're the owner's easy button right there, right? Just come fix this for me. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, I just need you to check all these things. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, either they figure it out, right? Or they're like, they really weren't that uncomfortable, not so uncomfortable that they're going to do the 7 things you just asked them to do. And it kind of goes away, or it's a genuine problem. I mean, there's been some times that it's a genuine problem and there is a loose wire nut or something like that.
When it comes to HVAC and comfort, you could have Josh Kreider, we did a couple episodes ago. I love this idea. He said, you need to do an episode where you record everybody individually in the same office, their opinion of comfort in that exact same office.
Yep.
Not a single person will say the same thing. Some people say they're fine. Some people are uncomfortable. And that's what we're also working against in HVAC. I had one survey. I had to go out as a third-party engineer to verify some of this or that. And it turns out this person was uncomfortable, but her definition of comfort is she wanted 70 degrees inside. And I told her, I was like, it's not even legal for us to design below 75 for cooling. The energy code doesn't allow us to size equipment to get below 75 degrees.
Yep.
And so even if it's the case that you're at 74 or 73, you're within the law and there's nothing that can be done technically, legally speaking, to remedy this for you. And she was not happy to hear that. She just immediately picked up her phone. I saw she just went into fuck this, I'm going to prove you wrong mode. And I could tell her she was Googling, waiting for that law. Yeah. I was like, whatever, I'll give you the code. I had my letter being like, this is what it is. But she had a different definition of comfort.
That's a huge piece. And same thing. I was involved in a situation where we had to bring out a third-party engineer. I can't even think of who it was. It was so long ago. But it was for a gather, right? That's an all, there's all these different offices. And so we went through and whoever the third-party engineer was told me, he said, look, I've got this, my office is like a showroom of HVAC, right? I've got like thermostats everywhere and VAVs or whatever.
Yeah.
He said, Jane is still freezing cold all the time and plugging in a little thing, a space heater and blowing circuits.
Tripping the breakers.
And Johnny down the hall is still trying to put the AC on 62. It's like, but you can't keep it, especially in an office, right? When you're just sitting there all day. It's just something that somebody's like, I'm uncomfortable,
The intro to the Josh episode is a cutscene of him describing at his office, they have, when he first got there, a VAV system just like that. Everybody had their own zone and everybody still complained. They had the HVAC company who had all the techs in-house that could fix everything possible, right? It worked. It definitely worked how it should. All the zoning, all these thermostats, people still complaining. And ultimately their solution was adding thermostats to every office that weren't even connected.
Placebo thermostat. Yeah.
And then all the complaints stopped. Once everybody believed that they had control over the comfort, they suddenly were comfortable.
That's smart. They should do that to go back to gather. Same thing. We would have, the thermostats are like in the corridors and stuff, right? They should be.
Yeah.
And then there's these offices where people are like, the AC doesn't work, right? And I'm like, this is an office designed for 4. You got 9 people in here, each with their own computer. Like, well, yeah, it's 85 degrees in here, but it's sensing out there.
Yep.
And they just, I guess the average person just can't wrap their head around that.
It's tough, man. And to top it all off, it's expensive. What is it about the cost of MEP? I've heard it's up to like a third of total construction budget. What is the actual cost for a project? I know it ranges, but
as a percentage of a budget, I would bet that a third is probably pretty close, right? And again, it's been like a year, maybe coming up on a year and a half since I left construction.
Yeah.
So if I spat off some of the the unit prices that are in my head, right? I bet Josh Kreider would come on here and laugh at me, right? Like when I was doing office, I would say all right, well, 350 square foot per ton and assume $3,000 to $4,000 per ton, right? I'd be curious, right? Is that even still close or
for office? That's pretty good. 3, yeah. I would put it closer to 3 to 3. What we've been doing is giving people ranges.
Yep.
And that range has a lot to do with somebody's individual comfort expectations. And, so what we're actually building for PermaZip is it's the solution to this freaking problem.
Free plug.
Yeah, right. So we're building an app that, we have the instant quote. I told the guys, I was like, well, we're already getting the category from the instant quote and the square footage of the project. What if we just took that information, also gave people what they can expect in terms of tonnage? Like if you're going to do a church that's 10,000 square feet, we know right off the bat the tonnage range you can expect for a church. If you're doing an office or if you're doing a restaurant. And so we're going to do the same thing so that people like you that are trying to do early pricing, we can very easily convert in a tonnage range. And then it'll give you an email like, here's the range you can expect. And on the high side, this is why it would become high. On the low side, this is why it would become low. Usually the low side is you don't care about comfort at all.
Yep.
If you want the cheap version, you're telling the people that literally don't care if I'm uncomfortable.
Code minimum.
That you have to say that out loud to yourself. And I'm telling you, it's still not cheap to get that. It's like just basic code minimum in the HVAC world is still expensive. And so that's kind of how we're approaching it. And that's how we do it now, because it's just the back of the envelope calc. But at 350 that you said for office is about true for office. 300 sometimes, or 275 if you really are starting to have envelope issues, that kind of thing. But when you get into a church, see, this is where we can run into a problem, is people use that 350 no matter the occupancy. And that's where it can really fuck you up, because a restaurant, church,
no matter the exterior too, right?
Yeah, like they'll not consider it, and then they get their 350 and now they're saying, no, that's not our HVAC budget. I need you to change the tonnage.
Yeah.
Like, no, I can't do that. You need to change your expectations or your inputs, or you need to change altogether your classification of use. Like, just don't be a giant church, be a half as giant church.
Yeah. Two levels of smoking instead of one.
Yeah. We call it input engineering now instead of value engineering. So there's no such thing as getting value for nothing. It's not going to happen. And I don't like that people are persuaded that they suddenly can get 100,000 removed from HVAC for the same value.
Well, you can get that, you can get, I think that where that comes from is you can sometimes get value for nothing in finishes, right? You can find a tile
lights
that looks super similar to another tile, right?
Yeah,
but, or whatever. Or you can get a t-shirt, right? Like, to really dumb it down. You get a t-shirt that costs $9 and a t-shirt that costs $900. Right? So there's value engineering there. But when you take it to the trades, it's you're not getting something for nothing.
Lights can also, except for my lighting reps, we'll get them on here to defend themselves and tell me exactly why I'm wrong. Respect to light reps, but for sure you can buy a very, very equivalent functional light. But I can say, as a nerd trying to figure out how to do this, that light is definitely cheaper than that light, and you could tell in the quality of light. So to be fair to lighting folks, like, if you value the quality of light inside the space, then it's worth paying the extra money, and it's not the same. It's cheaper. I mean, it's cheaper for a reason, usually. Sometimes it's not, though. It's not necessary to buy the durable this or that fixture quality if you don't need it.
And how many end users do you think, like, I would say it's a very small project type where they're actually thinking about the quality of the light when they think light fixtures, right? Most people are thinking, what do they look like? That looks just like that. It's half the price. Do that one.
Yeah,
exactly. The other one just like flickers and buzzes and shit all the time.
Yeah, I've noticed these actually are green in hue. You can notice it now if you look. These have a slight more green color than that, so more closely related to the sun. That looks like sunlight more closely than these look a little bit green.
I looked enough at the sun yesterday for the
I looked at that. Shout out solar eclipse.
2024 solar eclipse. Electrical gets a pass from all of this because our decisions are very code driven. Can you use NM? Can you use EMT? You have to use MC, yes or no. That's what the code says. Whereas y'all, it's like, what are your expectations? Like, how comfortable do you really expect to be when it's end of July, beginning of August, and it's 98 degrees outside?
Much more of a gray area.
Great band.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the code says that you have to have 3 feet clearance.
Yep.
3.5 feet or 2.5 feet wide, 3 feet deep, whatever it is. Like, that's it.
Your fights are on the light fixtures. And again, your light fixture reps are defend themselves, but everyone wants to know, like, how much does that one light cost? And it's like, I can only tell you what the package costs. It's like a big secret.
Yeah, what is that? We got to get a light rep. We actually are going to have Lighting Virginia potentially talk, so we'll get there, because a lot of people have some questions for the lighting reps of the world. They got to defend themselves. They got to have a chance to defend themselves. To be fair, that's what this is all about too. It's just like, we're engineers, so obviously we have our perspective, but you're from the background of the GC. You have your own priorities. You got your own schedule. It's crazy to me how much you got to keep up with.
Yeah,
and that. Let's just dive into that a little bit. We got design changes. We talk about design this episode. So we're throwing out probably thousands of design changes your way.
Yep.
What does that look like on the GC and trying to manage that?
So I think there's two types, right? This might be, we can iron something out here, right?
Yeah, here we go.
So there's design type changes that we're asking you for, right? And of course we need them all like yesterday, right? Oh, Kenny, it's so minor. Can you please just make it right now? Strip everything. Cancel the podcast. Just a little swap, man. Come on. And so those things, right? We manage very well, right? Now, I also think what you guys do is sometimes, right, we ask for some changes and you're like, oh, I also caught these couple mistakes. Let me slip these.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
No, not us, Chris. Come on now.
And all of a sudden, right? And again, honestly, it's not even that big of a deal, right? Like, because you're going to get this change and you're going to get it priced by the appropriate people and you're going to get it approved. It's usually an owner-driven change. Either they made a choice or we found something in the field and then they're going to sign off. But the little slip-ins get discovered like after that's all signed off.
I don't know
And
what
I'm
you're
like,
talking
all right, so we going to stick this up the sub? Are we going to eat it? Or has the owner really not been nice and we're just going to bring it to him again at the end?
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what he's talking about.
We're perfect.
Yeah. that we've learned, there's a lot of education that goes into the industry, understanding things. One of them is betterment and understanding what that is. And so we've been more comfortable with the idea that, hey, we caught something, nothing's been purchased. It's going to increase your price, but at this end of the day, you would have always had to pay this amount. That's a betterment, and sorry. So we're more comfortable with that conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, aren't you glad we caught this right now instead of it being built and then it became a dispute, blah, blah, blah. Or then we start battling. You didn't follow the specs. It means and methods, all these bad words. So we try to be a little bit more transparent there when we see that. Although, it's still can be quite tricky, when you're doing a revision, you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be a 1,000 amp bus.
Yeah, that's supposed to be a fuse disconnect.
Just cloud is right here, and it's like, we did your revision.
Change.
How difficult it is to go through that pricing effort too, whenever you get a revision.
Oh, again, it's like in a perfect world for me, like once construction's going and the owner, when I say owner-driven changes, it's one of two things. Either they requested it, which those are the easy ones, right? They're asking for it, so either do it or don't do it.
Yeah.
The ones that are a little tougher emotionally are like, hey, we discovered this in the field, so like you have. I mean, it's no one's fault, right? Like the owner owns what's underneath the concrete. The owner owns what we can't see.
Yeah.
And so, where we're saying, look, you gotta pay more to get the same thing. Essentially, they don't like that.
Well, see, that is the crux of design, and I speak only for the small, like, commercial market where design is always pinched. See, so we end up delegating things like coordination drawings and shop drawings, which there's never budget for. And then something shows up that is a direct result of a lack of focus on coordination and shop drawing efforts, which we didn't include in our scope. And so then it just becomes we discovered this thing, why'd you draw it here situation? And I go back to, it always seems so obvious once discovered. But in some situations, they've already fabricated the ductwork right off of our drawings. And I'm like, why didn't you at least disclose you were going to skip the shop drawing effort? Like, we could have gone through, if you had done the shop drawings, this would have been discovered when it was virtually designed.
Yeah.
And not now that I have, like, physically all of this ductwork laying on site, and now who you're going to point your finger at, it's the guy you asked to remove this from his scope. And now what do I got to do? Now I sound like there's no winning in that situation for me.
Yeah, I think
it's lose every time I turn.
The best way to, like, and no one's going to like it, but like, I think the best thing you can do is just kind of make everyone understand, right? Like, this is what happened, right? This is how it was designed. This is what we anticipated. And then this is the unexpected that we encountered. And then if you can give choices, right, that's the best. So because of this unexpected, you got choice A, choice B, and choice C.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the way I found, at least, that it was best received, right? Maybe they're not happy, but at least they understand it. If you can put it in terms that whoever has to sign the check can understand it, they can usually, at least, stomach it, live with it.
It just leads into a lot of scope creep for engineers who said, we're not going to do this service. Now you're obliged to basically do the shop drawings on behalf to solve the problem for people. And at that point, I guess it's just a business decision, depending on the client. Like, either I'm going to work with you and give you this free service, even though I said I excluded the nonsense type stuff, or I'm just going to tell you to shove it. Yeah. Next time pay me for the service.
Yeah.
It's
and
a
you
tough one.
keep saying shop drawings. What are shop drawings?
So,
I'm just
So for those GCs, I know for the trades and the GCs out there in the light commercial, this might be a word you don't understand. But
That's their cuss word.
Just kidding. We love our trades. There's a lot of folks out there that saved us a lot, and because
Shout out to Ben Matthews.
Yeah, Ben Matthews, Josh Kreider.
I love Ben. I love Josh. Yeah,
they're the kind of folks that do it in a way that they're proactive. They try to look intentionally for these things, even if they don't deliver us an explicit like shop drawing or coordination drawing. They're still intentionally, deeply thinking about the work and seeing like, oh wow, that's not going to work. Instead, some people, like, we're in the middle of a situation right now. Some people will just say, "Hey, fabricator, I got the drawings. These are the prints."
Yep.
Hate that word, prints. That means somebody got the second out of 9 pages
Yeah.
to fabricate from. And all of the other 9 pages, some or 8 pages suddenly don't matter. And they are arguably like technically in order of precedence on the spec. Like those specs they override the drawing, the picture. But in like commercial, nobody cares.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is it might not even be always like a lack of care, right? Sometimes, because you got to remember all this stuff like filters down to the guys in the field that are installing it, which are of varying experience and all this stuff, right? Yeah. And so some guys just don't know, right? They just are looking at their own things and they're installing it. And like the things that would drive me nuts is like, sometimes there would be, of course, I'm struggling to think of a good example in the moment, but maybe you got a big giant light fixture, feature light fixture, or whatever, and somebody like runs a piece of ductwork right through where that's supposed to go, and you just kind of sit there and you're like, look, it's my issue to figure out, or it's our issue to work together, but like, would have been a lot easier if you didn't install it first and then say, hey, we got to figure it. Like, come on.
It would have just made everybody's life a little bit easier. Or in this situation, it's fabricated, not installed. It's like, great, I got all this metal, this double wall insulated ductwork, and you built it all before you pre-planned anything. You can't tell me you pre-planned. I know it's dumb that I put this right here. I get it. Yeah. And I'll accept it. That was dumb of me.
Yeah.
But is it equally as dumb that you fabricated everything before you thought about it yourself? Did you not in your own mind think for a second, like, what this physically looks like on your side? Is there no accountability? Suddenly the prints.
Yeah.
It's one page.
I did it for the drawings.
Yeah, you did do it too.
Okay.
I say you did for the picture. Yeah, I know we all know how to look at pictures. But, this is engineering side. That's why we like having the trades on in general and the GCs, because, that's just our perspective of what design is. And on our side, people don't understand, like I said, ductwork is an afterthought, especially when the budget's low. We are focused on making sure the equipment capacity and features are suitable for the use described.
Yeah.
How it all distributes the air, we're just kind of just throwing it on the plans, being like, this should probably work. Yeah. We don't have the budget to like do all the coordination, the BIM and all of this, and then this iteration and redraw and redraw and redraw. That'll eat through the budget. And suddenly what you got for 20 grand is suddenly literally can turn into $100,000 worth of services very quickly. And so if you're going to pay 100 grand up front, then okay, I'll take more accountability for that.
Yeah.
Well, talk through that, because for the audience and for me, even as an electrical, like you say, a lot of our effort goes into picking the duct or the tonnage and the size and everything. But to most people, it's a square footage per ton calculation. So what actually goes into that?
Yeah. It's a lot of politics and negotiation, navigating why something should be more expensive. Mm-hmm. It's defending the decision, but it always comes down to, how are you using the space? How many people are going to be in the space? When will they be there? What does the weather look like here? What does the moisture look like inside and outside? And so we have to create this model that just runs through the whole year and anticipates all these things happening and picking a peak demand throughout that whole entire period of time, which is all from the inputs of consulting and code-based inputs.
And it's probably, sorry to cut you off, but I'd imagine it's not super easy, right? Like, it would be a lot easier for you if I say, hey, Kenny, we're going to drop the tonnage here. I need you to drop the tonnage. And you could say, well, here's your consequence. Mm-hmm. Is everyone okay with the consequence? Right. Mm-hmm. It probably is so many factors weighing in that it's not quite that easy to say, and here's your consequence.
It's hard to consult on.
People get so defensive over it too. Like, if you'll say, here's your consequence to that decision, they'll be like, just like mad at you or frustrated.
I literally was told I was mansplaining somebody the other day because I was describing the consequence. I was like, well, if you don't buy what I'm specifying, you'll be uncomfortable. And when I say uncomfortable, I was pushed on that. They're like, oh, well, we should be able to do this and this and still meet the budgets and this. I was like, no, zero amount of what you're proposing will work. You will be uncomfortable. And if you need a hard number for that, that means 85 degrees, 90% relative humidity inside. That's what I mean. But, but it's hard to even describe that, just, to what you're saying. In that moment, I found out later I was accused of mansplaining to this person. It's difficult as an engineer to describe why and have to justify continually why we've specified this thing, because it's extremely technical. You end up sounding like an asshole. You end up sounding condescending to these people, and it just doesn't work. And it's like, I don't know how to tell you why I just know that you're going to be yelling at me in about a year and a half.
If
Is
you
this a story about
explain,
you and your wife replacing the HVAC at your house?
Yeah, me and my wife. All of my wives
One of
were
my
so
wives.
mad at me.
one was all right with it, but the other one was mad.
One of the other one's a mechanical engineer, so she gets it. But there's all that politics, and we talk about this a lot. Engineers are not gifted in the consulting art. We're nerds, and so it's tough. We know this thing, and that's the battle. That's the service you're paying for when you have an engineer. So to put them into the world of having to coordinate physically, the Tetris puzzle of physically making it work is basically a completely separate task. That's why there's such a thing as coordination drawings and shop drawings. Yeah. Those things are labels with real definitions in this industry, and they are not free. And so when you're not paying the engineering firm to give them to you, somebody has to do them. And if somebody skips it, it's just in our experience being in light commercial, it suddenly becomes the engineer's fault who never did those things. It's just difficult to navigate. Also, on that note for design, remember, we're guessing what the weather might be. Our load calculations are far from a perfect science. We are talking about as accurate as a weather prediction of when a hurricane is going to land. We're guessing roughly what the outside conditions may be for you over the next 20 years, 15 years. Mm-hmm. They may change. Also, we're guessing over the next 15 years that what you described will happen inside the space is actually going to be happening.
Twice the amount of people.
All of that is a massive guess.
Yeah.
And if anything changes, then the features will not work the way we specified.
Yeah.
And so to deal statistically with all of the varying amounts of loads, that's what makes things expensive. If you want to be able to handle part load conditions, high humidity, low humidity, all of these things, it ends up costing a lot of money. And so it's just invariable that gets cut. And then they get occupied, and then the design gets chewed through. Oh, something's wrong. The engineer messed this up. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee you, any mechanical engineer, any mechanical installer would agree with this 100%. When we're out there in Chicago with ASHRAE, they're all like, yes. There's a clip of Jeff, one of the most popular.
Trying to tell you, lady.
I'm trying to tell you, lady.
He was talking about high ceilings, right?
Yeah, high ceilings and HVAC, and she didn't want this, so she value engineered it and cut it.
You know what's probably even trickier in the small commercial world we're talking about too is there, right? Maybe you won't admit this on the podcast, right? But there's probably jobs where it's easier to field coordinate than it is to do shop drawings, right?
Oh yeah.
If we're above a bunch of ACT in an office, it's like there's not even worth it. The effort to do shop drawings isn't worth it. Just figure it out in the field. Right, that's small commercial, right? Yeah. But then you come into this building, the Veil, that's got a giant hood over here, and we've got exposed ductwork, right? And it's like they both fall under that small commercial umbrella, but here, like hopefully there was shop drawings here. Yeah,
I don't think there were. I know there were for Great Minds in Richmond. I don't know if we got these shop drawings.
Well, but, that plays into you can explain it probably better than I can, but there was the study in Japan about the 6 factors that led to the success of a project and staying in budget and on schedule, and the number one was the experience of the design team and of the contractor, which I mean we can speak to even.
It was number 2. The first was like political, like if the government changes the law, suddenly
the first controllable one was experience.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Like all the things I've gotten wrong over the years, which is a lot, right? Yeah. I would always ask about them on the next project.
Yeah,
so if you don't know what to ask about, it's hard to it's hard to be proactive, and you're just reacting to every single thing that comes up on site.
Yeah.
Experience is important. Trust is another big one. One thing with Cliff we talked about, this is eye-opening to me as much as it is obvious, is that it's always a people problem. Really, ultimately, most things that we think are technical as engineers are usually just some sort of like relationship thing that can be remedied outside of the technical world. And it's hard for engineers to accept that. It's like, do you have a trusting relationship with this person? Or did you start off with the bat, like, you don't know this person and you went straight into accusing somebody of something, and now it's a shit show from there on?
I mean, I think the GC probably bears the responsibility, like, to sort of be the information translator, right? Yeah. You're going to speak about HVAC in a much different way than the subcontractor, than the owner, and the GC has to be in the middle and kind of translating to each person and trying to keep it productive, right? And the reality is, like, a lot of times, especially with the engineer and the subcontractor, the GC sitting there like, you guys might as well be speaking Chinese, right? Like, I'm like, I have absolutely no, can I 3-way, let's get you 2 on a 3-way call, solve it, and then then explain it to me, mansplain it to me like Kenny always does.
Yeah, like
That's-
Kenny. Yeah, well, he literally always
You
does.
just don't know how to explain anything other than mansplaining. You know, you're talking about that person, Kurt. Kurt's always the person that comes to mind.
Yeah.
He's like maybe not an expert in the thing that we're talking about, but he knows enough to be able to ask the quote stupid question. But
Yep.
it's never a stupid question because
Yeah.
it makes somebody like me or Kenny or whoever else that's so deep in the weeds kind of zoom out a little bit and think of the more obvious solution. And
Yeah.
he's a perfect person at just getting in you same way when you're in Urban Core, like same way of just understanding just enough
Yeah.
to get the people who need to talk
To
to
get
each
the
other.
smart people to figure it out.
Yeah, let the
Right, Kurt?
nerds talk to the nerds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or smart enough to hear the nerds talk to nerds, which is what I always say. Let the nerd talk to the nerd. But like somebody who's sharp enough to kind of get the gist of what's happening to suggest things that may sound dumb, but often that's usually the best solution because we're so stuck in like the super technical, imaginary particle, ridiculousness, right? We're like, oh, well, this is technically the words. And then suddenly you or Kurt might come up like, well, this is dumb, but what if we did this? And we're like, yes.
It doesn't,
Yes.
it's not usually that easy. It's not usually yes. It's usually, you're right. That's a really stupid idea, but you just made me think of a good idea, right?
Yeah.
That's what you guys
I
do.
mean, it just keys you in because we just get so stuck in the tower that we're in of like code and all this nerdy stuff.
Yeah.
And it comes out of nowhere and out of left field, and that's by design. And I think that for me, that's what makes a good GC or project manager, somebody who's able to know just or understand just enough what these nerds are talking about to kind of pitch out some ideas and see what sticks to the wall to keep the idea moving, to keep the brainstorming going.
So the other thing I didn't do enough when I was a GC, and I've learned now since I switched over to the software sales, is ask people why they care about things, right? So you've got a client that's like, I really want this room to be, 70 degrees or whatever, make something up. And we immediately go, GC goes to you, hey, we got to change the HVAC. They want this or what's that. And nobody stopped to ask them, why do you actually care about that? Because it could be solved a completely different way.
Yep. Jacob Comby talks about that. He's an architect out of Norfolk, and we've been guilty of that ourselves too. You get an RFI, right? Asking, can we change, this, that, or the third? And us as engineers, we'll just go straight into solving that problem and not ever zoom out and ask, why do you want it this way? Either it's a budget problem, a physical constraint. And if we can better understand what the actual issue is, we can help kind of solve the issue, not just go straight into solving what they're trying to solve, because it might not be the best solution. It's just one they came up with.
Yeah. Why is a powerful question.
Yeah.
Some of those RFI, I again, as a GC, I would try to, and this is a little bit of a different topic, but just funny. I would try to filter them out. Sometimes they probably came through, but like you get these questions, these RFIs, and like, this is a trap. Like they're trying to get me to answer this a certain way.
Hang on. Wait, here we go. I know, I can see that from a mile away. Basically, in our mind, I'll let you continue, but almost every RFI, we're just like, oh God, here it comes. We don't hear about it until it's a problem, but yeah.
I want to talk to my lawyer.
Yeah, that's, I'm sure you guys see, because I was in the beginning, I didn't know any better. I was so guilty of like these horrible RFIs, right? And I've realized like they got the more specific, the better, right? Like here, Kenny Carter, here's my problem, right? Here's what I looked at. Here's my proposed solution, right? That's probably the dream RFI for you guys, right? Like,
oh yeah.
And then my biggest fear was always, the worst. And believe it or not, like the GCs do hate this feeling when you're like C drawing M102 detail 3. And like, oh, I swear I looked. I swear I did. I just miss it sometimes,
Well, that brings up for me, we talk about trust a lot. And I've been telling Carter, as we drive and do these things, like, a litmus test for me, if there's enough trust, is if I know what kind of meme I should be sending to that person that would make them laugh. Like then that that's probably not going to be an RFI. That's going to be like Ben will be that way with this. But hey, what the fuck are y'all thinking about this? How the hell do you think a transformer would fit right here? Type situation. Yeah. But, I didn't think about whether it would fit right there, Ben. That's exactly right. And then we have the trust to just tell them straight up, because then we get ahead of it and it doesn't become a trap.
Yeah.
RFI, which is what they are if you don't know this person.
Yep.
Some random electrician schmo that doesn't know me, doesn't know what memes I laugh at, and I don't know what one he laughs at.
And the RFI is written in a way, it's like, can we make this 600 amp or 400 amp? That's like our worst RFI. It's like now we start going through every single, and you're never going to get an answer to it. If you do, it's going to be 4 weeks from now. Because we've got to think through every possible solution on why, 400 might be okay instead of 600.
Yeah.
You can tell, because just like we say, refer to M1, blah, blah, blah. The RFI will also be like, well, on M1, blah, 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 it says to do this thing. And we did that thing, and now that thing won't fit. And we're like, cool. Cool.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the trust thing too, right? Because there's just like, when the GC is making a mistake, like you guys make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
No, not us. No, we specifically don't. Yeah.
But I would always try, like when I would catch like, ooh, this is a mistake, right? I mean, I would hope the guys you have good relationships with are calling you, right? Like, I gotta ask, how do you want me to ask this? You know, like let's get a solution without me saying, hey, despite your completely conflicting details on back-to-back pages, I'm going to need some direction here.
Or just wait until it's installed so that you can like change order the hell out of somebody. That's even worse.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and there's sometimes you just end up with a bad situation on hand. I can always say we expect this or that, and it'll never help. It'll just never help to go there. And that's kind of where I'm at in a situation right now with this ductwork, this or that. I'm just trying to be helpful. I got to get the trade contractor on the call, and it's more or less like trying to do some trust building with accountability. Like, look, man, between you and me, why the hell, you got to tell me, why did you not do the shop drawings?
Yeah.
Why did you fabricate this stuff? Because now I'm in this situation where I'm not going to say it or throw you under the bus or anything, but like I asked for them. What the hell were you thinking? Why would you straight up take these drawings and start fabricating from them, man? Was there never a period when you were fabricating this duct that you thought this was a bad idea?
You know, it's not quite the same thing, right? But what as the GC will get from trades is like this list of questions, right? And they're all legitimate questions, right? And they come from a high horse place sometimes, right? And they're like, I'm stuck, right? I showed up on site. I can't do anything because you can't answer these questions. And I'm like, you also didn't ask the questions until you showed up on site. Yeah. Yeah. And you priced these drawings 4 months ago, and you know, like, so not exactly the same thing, but I'm like, dude, you're really like, you couldn't have looked at them last week knowing you were coming out, and we could have got in front of it a little bit. And that's when we're calling you over and over and over. I just need this answer. Come on.
I think you had mentioned something. We were talking, you were at Urban Course still. You were like, I know y'all don't really look at this until like the day before it's due.
No.
I was like, what are you talking about? I know my whole life is looking at this project right now. But you know, that did definitely, it's a good point. And that does happen because, you know, you have to schedule, the task may be a 3-hour task. So if I say I'm going to get it to you next Wednesday, I'm saying I'm going to look at it next Wednesday and then give it to you because I'm otherwise booked. But I think there's a perception that this design answer, out externally, like I'm entitled to your mind right now. So why would you bring up this problem in a week from now? And that's just going to be the forever problem that we deal with as engineers. Because while you got people telling you they're walking off site, we're like, well, we can't even mess with it until next week. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's just a problem. You know, it's not efficient. No one in construction can just be working on one job, right? But the last thing some owner wants to hear when they're paying $1 million, $2 million, $5 million for a project is like, well, sorry, I got these 3 deadlines for this other project, right? So you can never say that, but it's a balancing act. I thought, while we took that little break there, I thought of a funny story that popped into my head, but I didn't get a chance to tell it. So you made a joke about drawing from the pictures, right?
Yeah.
Referencing the ductwork plan. The prints, as you call it, right? But we had a project that took it to a whole nother level, right? So this was like a small little restaurant, and we walk in at the end of the project, and there was the owner immediately is like, there's supposed to be this like a shroud over the hood, right? It's just a hood with no shroud. And I actually wasn't the PM on the job, but like I hear this story, they're like, what? Like scrambling through the drawing. Like, what are you talking about? Right. And so then they flip to the very back, like, and point to a rendering, right? Like, look, it's right here. It's in the renderings, right? So kind of, this was like supposed to be a punch list walk. So they're kind of like, okay, well, we'll circle back to that, right? So it gets uglier and uglier, right? And so then when it finally blows up, I don't know why I ended up there, but I was actually at the meeting where it kind of blew up a little bit, right? And so it's the PM and the owner, and he's like, you guys price the drawings. It's right there in the drawings, right? And the RPM's like, yeah, I know. And we forgot that. And we also forgot the fucking mannequins pointing at the people in the rendering.
Oh my God, that is fucking crazy. Oh, man. Wow.
Those are those things that are so in the moment are like so horrible, right? And then like, a week later, you're laughing like, how about that meeting?
My God.
Got a point.
I also forgot the fucking mannequins and the fucking plants over here.
The people and the
Your entourage.
Cars, the cars, the trees on the side of the road.
I forgot the little Tesla render car to be parked in front of your building as well. Yeah, that's the renderings will get you. Well, it is difficult. What the battle over what is on the drawings or what's not, which is why we're unpacking design, what it means to. I've already told you what it is from our perspective, but just from yours purely, ignoring anything that I've ever said in this podcast, like what makes a good design to you? Like as a GC, when you have a set of drawings in front of you and you would consider this is a good design.
So I think that a good design is almost like a good budget, right? Where the assumptions that were made, and they always have to be made, right? Even when we say we're done, it's ever evolving, are very clearly benchmarked, right? So like if we're going through, and I'm picturing like the design process, right? Not just getting handed, oh, here's a set of plans for bid.
Yeah.
Hey, we're at 50%, right? Here's major assumptions. Here's what's still up in the air. Like that is always so helpful because it allows us to then turn around and communicate back to the owner.
Yeah.
Hey, we've included all this, right? Here are the spots that are kind of still unknown and decisions that you need to make that are going to cost you a lot of money. Right. And that, owners are, and this isn't even a knock, right? And I do the same thing in my own house, right? All they really care about usually is like the finishes, right? That's what people want to look at. And it's so hard during design to be like, you guys don't realize that what tiles on that wall does not matter for a lot more months,
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of clearly lay out to you, here's the cost, it's for this, and here's the unknowns. And so if you're doing that same thing in design, here's what we designed, here's what we assumed, and here's the questions that are still coming that are going to really swing the needle one way or another, right? No, I don't care what the diffusers look like. I really don't care because if you spec something and it's super expensive, there's 400 other options out there that we can figure out, So
I think it's just so complicated. It's such a complex process. It's almost, we've talked about it. It feels like a miracle anything actually ever gets built.
Yeah.
Just considering all the variables that come into play. But one way we've tried to do that is to say really big on our first front page, don't do anything until you read this. I mean, it's font that's literally printed this big and everybody's still, I was on site one time and the guy had started laying out ductwork before all the things that I asked for. And I just like sitting there with a giant piece he's got the whole drawing set this thick. I flipped to our first page. I was like, what do you want? Should I just rip this out? I don't know. Do you want me to just put this one in the trash?
Aren't those just boilerplate?
Yeah, he looked at me. He's like, what you talking about? I was like, I just was curious. Like, this one doesn't matter, right? Should I just rip it out, throw it in the trash? And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Where it says, the pre-plan and specifically the shop drawing, and I was just like trying to tell him like, because he started in hot, be like, well, your drawing said this and this. And he was taking tape and measurements off my drawings right off the bat. And I was like, well, look, come here with me. Let's go walk to my drawings real quick. And then that's where I say, should I rip this out? But we've realized people ignore that no matter what.
Yeah.
Like we've literally had trade contractors be given just the picture out of the 9 pages and they price off of it, which drives us crazy. So our current solution to that is to be at the kickoff meeting to your point about make it clear your assumptions, vocalizing them just so people know it's real. Like I know this doesn't feel real when you look at it, but this paragraph is real.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to do that paragraph, let's at least say it out loud so that Mr. Owner knows what risk he's being exposed to.
Yep. I will say this is, and this, maybe you guys, probably not, you guys don't make mistakes, but
yeah, we don't do that.
This is an architect thing. So we can get Amrit will probably call me after this airs and yell at me. But what is really frustrating in design is the GC is there's a deadline, right? Whether it's permit drawings or whatever. And so it's Friday, the deadline hits, the drawings get distributed to everyone else, everyone, including the owner. And then as the GC, I get this email to just me. Hey, just so you know, here's the changes that are also coming next week. We're still working on them. And I'm like, okay, so the owner thinks you hit your deadline. I can't do my next piece
throwing me under the
unless
bus.
I say he didn't actually deliver. He just did a fake delivery,
Yeah.
And so that like changes are coming email. That is the worst thing about design.
Yeah. So you're being, it looks like to the owner,
Yeah.
you got what you
Engineer
need.
did his job.
Yeah.
GC, now it's your turn. And I'm like, it's not really my turn.
That's
Yeah.
your version of somebody telling me that I did it per drawings. It's like you have the design. I just
Yeah.
got a few small
A few
changes.
small changes.
You're like, you mean the $250,000 worth of change? You're like, what am I dealing with? Plus, I got to run my trades down the pricing rabbit hole.
Yep.
And then in a week from now, I got to tell them to redo it, which I'm curious about that. Like, how much stress does that put on the trades to reprice and reprice and reprice?
It depends on why, right? It's
Yeah.
like pricing fatigue is definitely a thing. And we got, like, as a GC, we got much better over my years there at being like, a couple things. One, if a project's been priced like 9 times, right? Don't get excited when it comes to you, because it's not going anywhere. And then the other one is when we would be going through, right? Like an adaptive reuse is a great example, right? You know that you have stripped your pricing down to the absolute bare minimum with exclusions and all that stuff, right? And not shady, right? Telling the owner, okay, I'll take that, I'll exclude that. And the owner's at the very top of their budget, right? The only time we would ever do that as a GC, once we got smart, is it's like, this is a one and done client, because they are going to hate us at the end, right? And we're not even trying to make a ton of money. It's just adaptive reuse. You always find things. And so if they're at the top of their budget and we're at the bottom of ours, it's not set up for success.
Yeah.
Duke Dotson talked about that. About how he's got more contingency percentage in adaptive reuse in new construction.
Oh, you have to.
It's more likely for some, especially the smaller it gets, and if it's adaptive reuse, those have the highest contingency.
I think he specifically also said it for small projects.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like the smaller the project, like the bigger contingency he's got if it's adaptive reuse, because it's just so much that could come up that could impact it.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're carrying your contingency on a percentage basis, right, that's just kind of math. You know, you got to carry a bigger one. If
what is so we don't know. Engineers are not so connected. What does contingency look like, and how do you even begin planning that?
So,
that's a good question.
Another hour
There's
long.
a lot of layers to it, right? So let's take an adaptive reuse, all right? And let's just say we're taking some old building on Broad Street and we're going to put 8 apartments into it, right?
Yeah.
So the way that we think about contingency as the GC, right? So even if I'm pricing plans, complete plans, there's kind of 3 layers of contingency, right? We take, let's just say, we get a trim price, right? A trim guy gives us a price to install all the trim. But then we know, like, we're tying in old to new. It's DHR project. We've got to do some old trim.
Yeah.
So we're going to put a trim contingency right on top of the trim, right? That doesn't get advertised to anyone. We just know it's coming.
Yeah.
Right. So there's one layer. Then there's the next layer of, like, you know, on the job. And it depends, like, is demo done or not is huge. And then, like, how detailed are the plans, right? Is part of it. And then we put that blanket contingency, right? Which is typically anywhere between like 2% to maybe 10% at the most.
Ooh, I like that. 10%.
I mean, 10% is
Give me
rare.
10%.
10% is like 10% is what we would do, like, on our projects that we were doing, like, for ourselves. You know,
when you want to be realistic.
Yeah. But I mean, and also, like, when there's no demo, like, demo hasn't been done yet, right? You're going to do demo and all of a sudden, like, you're going to find all sorts of stuff.
Oh yeah.
But then we would tell, right? So then that's all the GC stuff. And then we would be telling the owner, like, you got to carry a contingency, Mr. Owner, right? And, like,
gotcha.
so then there's Mr. and Mrs. Owner. So, and then there's, like, different layers. Again, demo's huge, right? Could there be asbestos? So then we're telling them you should carry a ton more.
Yeah.
Or could there be structural issues? Or if we know there's none of that, you know, and all it really does is, like, contingency is sort of just setting expectations, right? So, you know, at the most granular level, I know that the subcontractor, in theory, should take the plans and he should walk the site and he should document every little thing, and he's not gonna, right?
Yeah,
So I'm gonna carry a little bit for him to come back to me, and if it's reasonable, I'll pay him for it. If it's not reasonable, I won't. And then the same thing as the GCs, we should walk the site and we should know every single little thing, right? And we try, but we don't, right? So we're gonna carry some money for some gray area unknowns so that we aren't coming out of our pocket and we don't have to go back to the owner. And then we're trying to set the owner expectations, because we're saying, hey, we're going to come across some things that are not little and are not gray. And we're going to come back to you and say, Mr. Owner, you owe me more money.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the three levels of expectation you're trying to set with the contingency.
Expectation management. And so, I always say that I wish design got magical contingency. I wish I could have that. But the idea that that's the risk, right? I mean, that's why I appreciated when Duke said on small projects, I increase or not, my contingency, because he knows that he's not buying down the risk. There's no budget to buy it down with the design. The shop drawings don't make sense. It makes more, you earlier said, at some point, it makes sense to just go ahead and let it be field coordinated.
Yeah.
And if that's the understanding going in, I'm fine with that too as engineer. I was like, okay, fine, no shop drawings.
I was just going to ask earlier that scenario where you were going to rip the page out of the plans, right? I would venture to guess that you would never say that if the guy said, "Hey, Kenny, can you come on site and kind of help me out a little bit? I've got a few questions," right? You said that because he attacked you like your drawings were wrong.
He's like, "I did this. This is what your plan showed. This and that." I'm like, "Okay, well, come here, tell me." And then it's tit for tat. There's an awesome game theory. We'll put a link in the description to it. From Veritas, he does this awesome description of game theory. And the summary is basically the best way to interact with people when presented with the prisoner's dilemma is basically treat them the way they treated you last time, with a little bit of forgiveness built into it.
Okay.
So if you were shitty to me last time we talked, I'm going to assume that you're being shitty to me, and I'm going to be that way to you. But if during that time while I was shitty to you, you suddenly were nice, I'm like, okay, well, next time I'll be nice. Sounds like he became nice. So I'm forgiving the shittiness. There's forgiveness baked in. And then 1 out of every 10 shittinesses from you to me, I'll forgive and assume it's noise in the system. And just that I've misinterpreted
bad
something.
day.
Yeah. Like maybe I'm
actually
had a bad
mad
day.
at the last person I talked to.
Yeah, right. And so it's on me. I'm going to forgive, right? And so that's kind of how we're dealing with it. We're always approach things, assuming no malice and trying to approach conflict in this way. But as soon as you attack during a confrontation where I assume no malice, that we're all good, my next turn is going to be, all right, tell me where I should tear this. You want me to tear this drawing out? Let's just throw it in the trash then. If that's where you want to go and you say that my drawings are messed up, let's just go ahead and look at the fact that genuinely, legally speaking, this is a construction document. This is a contract for you that you failed to comply to. Do you want me to play that card? And it doesn't go well. It doesn't go well.
That card's never productive.
Never productive.
Yeah.
But that's why I like the tit for tat, because then in the next time, if you're nice, then I'll forgive all for it and be like, hey, I'm with you. We'll be teammates again.
Yeah.
Because I like to start there. But it sucks that you have to go, that the industry, it's structured to be like,
yep.
Yeah.
It's like we all got guns.
The Spider-Man meme.
Yeah. This is what it's built for. And this is the primary motive of the podcast, to show people behind the scenes, like why this happens or what does happen. And just like, it's honestly, it's rooted in, we all have our own perspectives and we're just not appreciating each other's perspectives.
That right there is why the relationships, I think, are so huge in the design GC owner, right? If we've worked together 5 times and something pops up that's a mistake, even if it's glaring, right? You're going to know like, oh, Chris just made a mistake, right? It's not, and we're not coming out, fingers pointing at each other.
So you went from GC world. Where were you before that?
I was an accountant for AMF Bowling.
Accountant.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Where were you before that?
College.
Okay. Did you go to school for accounting?
I did, only because they made me pick a major. They said you can't graduate undeclared.
Where'd you go to school?
Westchester University. It's in Pennsylvania. I grew up outside of Philadelphia.
Oh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I've gone to an Apple festival out there with my buddy Jeremy. Shout out Jeremy. But yeah, so from accounting to construction.
Yeah.
Sure. And then you were at Urban Core for a few years. I mean, I feel
almost 9.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. How long were you there when we first? I did the ARC building, and think you were the
so that was interesting. Like my transition was, I was an accountant because I didn't know what I was doing with my life, right? And I was like, it was fine, right? But it was like, this is not forever. And so I ended up joining Urban Core, and at the time I joined Urban Core, it was like just the 2 owners were flipping houses, and they had some rentals that were occupied. So I was a property manager / project manager, right?
Oh,
and
okay.
All project manager meant was like, the 2 owners would call me, like Race, who would call me earlier in the morning and be like, no, you go to Lowe's for me. Like, fuck the other guy. He doesn't matter. You got to go to Lowe's for me today. So like, lo and behold, right? Fast forward a few years, we start doing some commercial stuff, right? Like again, we did some stuff for Duke and before we know it, like all of a sudden we're like, we're a real construction company now,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mhm.
Y'all were in the Gather space initially, right down there in
Gather's one of the first ones we did.
Yeah.
The Arc building, 1400 Boulevard.
Yep.
Where Gelati is and all that. That's one of the first ones we did.
That Archingen, you said Archingen on accident, but that was Archingen back then. It was we worked together.
Yeah.
That's for Chet, the bed, and like we had Chet there and working with y'all, and so from there, you had all this experience. I'm sure construction is a great industry and it's a shitty industry all at once.
Yeah.
It's just such useful skills are developed, but it's insanely stressful. So from there, you left and you went to Procore, right?
Correct. Yep.
From there, now you're at
So I kind of, I loved Urban Core, right? It was so hard to decide to leave there. Like the people there are awesome.
yeah.
But I sort of just had enough of construction, right? I kind of was at this place where for a while there to work, 60 hours a week if you had to or whatever. I loved it, right? And then as I had kids, I go, I'm kind of like, I don't want to work 60 hours a week. And then I always felt behind and just, I was like, I can't do this forever. And so, kind of was like, what the hell am I going to do? And talking with friends and stuff like that. A couple of them were in software sales. Like, you need to do software sales. Like, it's the best, it's awesome. So I'm like, I don't know the first thing about software sales and went to work Monday and like opened up Procore, which is if anyone doesn't know, it's a construction management software, probably the biggest one out that kind of everyone knows. I'm like, I do like this software. Right?
Yeah.
So I just harassed everybody on LinkedIn from Procore I could find and
shit. Okay.
kind of weaseled my way in there. And it was cool, right? It was a good transition into the industry and giant corporation, right? And like, whatever, I guess it doesn't matter who hears this now. Like it's a huge corporation. I didn't have to work very hard, right? Like, which after being burned out a little bit from construction
It's a nice change
for
of
like
pace.
3 months was like awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like for the first 3 months, I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever done, right?
Yeah.
But pretty quickly becomes like not very fulfilling, not overly satisfying, right? Like getting your golf handicap from like a 29 down to a 26, like not that cool to brag to people about, right?
Yeah. I'm like at 150 or something.
And so I ran into this company Zabel at a conference, and they essentially offer a service where they take all your old construction data, they scrub it for you, they clean it up.
Yeah.
They turn it into historical cost database, right? It's like the GC's dream, right? And they do it all for you. And then the software has an interface where you can run some, with very little information, build a conceptual estimate with some inputs, and it'll come out. And so I saw this at this trade show, and I was like, this thing's incredible. And I introduced them to Urban Core, and Urban Core ended up buying it. And so I kept in touch with the CEO there, and about 6 months later, he was looking to bring somebody on board, and we've got sort of big grand vision that one day Zabel is like, right now it's very much catered to this conceptual level estimating and basic estimating, but it can be this full pre-construction suite. It's going to contain takeoff software and bid management and stuff like that. And so I very quickly realized talking to Hamid, the CEO and founder of Zabel, that I missed that building of a company that I had at Urban Core.
Yeah.
And so it's been great, like to jump back in and not only be focusing on the software sales, which is fun, but the building of the company, building the processes and stuff like that. And it's almost like I've got a second chance at it. I did it once at Urban Core, and I already know some of the mistakes I made. Yeah, it's construction versus software, very different, but it's much easier for me to raise my hand now and say, no, I know this doesn't seem like a problem, right? But we can solve this company problem now for $5,000 as opposed to $100,000 in 2 years.
Yep.
That's what we call company engineering, and being PermaZip, where our whole motto of life is to make engineers accessible to the small project market. Like, we just want to make it easy to find an engineer that can do what you need. But what comes along with that is engineers don't sign up to do small, like commercial projects. That's not why you go to, first of all, engineers don't go to school to put rectangular pieces of metal in the air that air passes through. They're usually thinking about like airplanes and shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not out there doing this. And so we're already got our work cut out for us finding great talent. On top of that, we've decided to do light commercial, which is like the least desirable. And so what you're describing is interesting because we're after those kinds of engineers, those that are interested in like the engineering of the business as well.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like being able to find a place where you're able to do the same thing, have an impact on like what the business does or how it operates, or things that are like impactful to how the growth works and all that.
Yeah, it's so much fun, and especially the extreme, right, of being at Procore, which 4,000 person company, publicly owned, and one of the first days I was at Zabel, I reached out to the CEO, my boss, and said, "Hey, I want to make this change." Right, I described the whole change in our CRM software, and he's like, yeah, cool. I just made you the admin. Do whatever you want. I'm like,
that sounds all too familiar.
Yeah, I have missed this.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, like, come with all of that authority, the responsibility, all this, and like some people might complain, there's not enough systems or processes. Or the other side is people are complaining about the systems and processes, but once they're established, then you don't have any authority to change them. So it's like either they don't exist and you're given admin, like, okay, fine, here's admin. Please, for the love of God, I love this idea. Please make it better.
Yeah.
Or it's already established and everybody already has admin rights and you're stuck not being able to change it, even if you want.
Yeah. It's like when you're building that, I mean, you guys are doing it, right? When you're building this business, right? It's like you would do anything, right? Financially, usually, like every problem has a dollar value, right? And you're like, if that problem can go away for X dollars, right? There's the check. It's solved forever.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, one thing I think that this software does is this. I think a lot of GCs, right, at least 50% have this issue where they're like, we want to build a historical cost database. And I realized, like, wow, what this company does is they make that problem go away, right, for a dollar value. And that's why I'm like, I saw the potential there.
Well, so the motif here, we're talking design. I know we've gone in a lot of directions, but you said the word concept, which is to say that from a GC's perspective or from an installer's perspective, you're ultimately designing how you model. You're attempting to create a model in your head, a design of how you even approach this work. You're thinking to yourself, all right, they want this. That means I'm gonna need this many people, this or that. Okay, I need to buy these materials and shit. This guy's over here, and then fucking California's the only place I can buy it. So that shit. All right, so you're designing a price. You're approaching this, and I think it needs to be appreciated that there's the kind of thought that goes into modeling, creating a price to install this thing.
Yeah.
So you're saying you've mastered some way to schematically provide a price. Just in your experience as a GC, how far off is your schematic pricing from the real?
Well, so here's what it's if it's far off, there's a reason why. And this is what I think the beauty of it is what this software does is it takes your own historical projects, right? And you're pulling from them, and whether it's an average of the cost of all three, or you say, oh no, in this one we did really high-end cabinets, so let's turn this off, right? And you can present to your client, here's our conceptual estimate, and here's what it's based on. This project, and this project, and these assumptions. And so then if you get to phase 2, right, 50% drawings, and then all of a sudden the price is a lot higher, it makes it so much easier to say, here's why your price is higher, right? I'm a stupid example, right? But we picked much nicer tile. Like there's way more tile in this one, or maybe it's been 3 years, right? Oh, we pulled comps that are 3 years old. And so we didn't put enough escalation on there. And so what I think is not only does it allow you to put the price together, but I think the more important part is it allows you to let your client understand where the price came from. So when there are variances, you can explain them, right? They might not like them, but at least you can explain them.
You mentioned this idea of escalation. Can you dive in a little bit what that means just for folks that are not like pricing experts?
Yeah. So I don't really know what it means except for prices go up. But obviously everybody knows, right? Whether it's a ductwork in a building, or a brick, or a piece of wire, or a Big Mac, right? Like prices are not the same today that they were in the year 2015, 2000, 1990. And so that's a very extreme example, but sometimes in construction, right? A couple of years ago, lumber went insane, right?
Yeah.
We literally had to get lumber. We were getting lumber prices and telling the owner, you got 24 hours to sign this or the price changes.
Holy.
I mean, 24 hours, right? Like, and I don't know, we could ask somebody, maybe it was even less than that sometimes. And so you need to know, right? If I'm building if this Vail Brewing we built, a year and a half ago, roughly, if we built this exact same project today, it would cost more. How much more? There's a little bit of an art to that, right?
I'm glad you said that, because I will nail that down to what it's like to do load calc when people are like, oh, the engineer messed up, because it's just like that. You're guesstimating escalation or contingency, or like you're trying to guess to the best of your ability how much shit might show up that you could never have predicted. That's reasonable to assume would show up. And so escalation is that way. I mean, nobody could have predicted it at 2020, 21, 22 that lumber would have skyrocketed like that.
Yeah,
Nobody's escalation works. And now all of these bank underwriting notes don't work, and all these developments are dying because of that. And that's part of, I think, the art of the design of pricing things, and part of the solution you're providing at the schematic level for sure. But yeah, I think that is important because, and it ties into our design, our perspective design. Let's just take it. These are like two very opposite ends, right? So I'm saying that light commercial, I'm just focused on the piece of equipment. The piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what I'm doing when I engineer. It's just picking out the piece of equipment. And then you got to put all the ductwork in, and I'll kind of sketch it. And then you're taking that information and all the other factors and trying to put a price to it at schematic level and managing all the politics along the way. So, I mean, I would guess, from my perspective, hearing what you're saying, if I were to guess what design is for a GC, what you do is design you orchestrator. You're like an orchestrator.
Yeah.
You're designing the orchestra. You pick who you think would present the least amount of risk based on how you're modeling the price. Who should be the best contractor? Who would be the best?
I mean, that's even that's a little further down the line, but I think early on, right, when we're doing this conceptual estimating, again, I go back to the best thing you can do is be upfront with your client about where the estimating or where the numbers are coming from, right? So if you're basing your price for HVAC, hey, we assume 350 square foot per ton and we assume $4,000 a ton, right? That's where that number came from. Now, maybe it's wrong, right? But at least when we get the final number, we can say, hey, when we assume 350 square foot per ton, we were wrong, right? We didn't know that you were going to have an occupancy load of off the charts, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm not saying it's my fault, but that's where we're wrong. And at the same time, sometimes when you, especially in the small commercial, like offices and stuff, right? Sometimes and again, this is more of an architect thing, but you'll see this thing like, feature wall.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like, so you have to tell that.
I always say, take the grass off the fucking wall.
I say feature wall, it's $5,000 allowance. And they'll say, what that? I say, I mean, you can do something for $5,000. Right?
Yeah. You can feature something. It could be those two goats, or it could be this neon light.
So, but being up front, like, where'd that number come from? I just made it up, man. Like, I don't, you want this to be cheaper? Hey, watch. Feature wall. That's $2,500.
Now you can paint it.
Yeah.
You can have 4 plants instead of 8.
Yeah.
So I love that you just said 350 square foot per ton and $4,000 per ton, because I think most contractors, even the trades, will estimate a price like that. And I think that's why we're building this tool, because not everything is based on the square footage per ton, but also when you have a project that's closer to 250 or 200 square foot per ton, the tonnage ends up being more expensive than 4,000 square foot per ton. So not only are you ending up ratcheting up the tonnage for the square footage, the cost of that tonnage goes to 2,200 to 2,500 because now you're talking DOAS. When you're at tonnages at that rate, when you're down to 200 square foot per ton and you have so many tons, chances are, or the likelihood that it's at that high level of tonnage is because you need 100% outdoor air, and those things are expensive. And now it's no longer 4,000 square foot or $4,000 per ton. It's in Captive Air. Did not tell me this, but you could buy a DOAS roughly around this $2,200 to $2,500 per ton number, and that's almost twice as much as what you're estimating at GC level, which is why we wanting to provide like the ability for better accurate, which is why I like what you guys are doing too, like looking at historical data, getting a better accurate level of understanding. And if I were to say from HVAC MEP perspective, remembering that we're at about a third the cost of construction, so we are there at a high impact, the occupancy use does matter. So if you're at assembly, expect that your HVAC to just skyrocket. Unless you want them to write on the dotted line, I don't care about comfort.
Do you have a way that you can explain that to an end user that's not with that? Like, because when I know what you mean when you say you got to change your assembly use matters.
Yes.
Do you have a way to explain that to Mr. Owner or do you mansplain it to them?
You know, I usually just try to mansplain. You know, all my wives always get mad at me for it. You know, I start with mansplaining, and that's because usually
And if
successful.
that doesn't work, I'm
yeah,
not good at this.
yeah. Well, that's why we're trying to develop this app, and we're almost trying to make it an embed for other contractors or HVAC salespeople to use. Like, hey, do you want to know how many tons you may need?
Mm-hmm.
Fill in this little thing, and then you'll know how many tons you can expect and the relative cost of that tonnage. Because not only does your tonnage go up per square foot, but as you go up in tonnage per square foot, it's like a multiplier. It's like an exponential curve. Yeah. It now starts to be expensive for a different reason. Now, because you're having a higher density of tonnage, it's because you're having to buy more expensive stuff. Generally.
And I'll tell you what, speaking of like HVAC sales, and Captive Air did a spectacular job. Like, I never even heard of a DOAS until you couldn't get rooftop units for a year and a half. And then Captive Air was calling everybody under the sun and like, you get these DOASs in 12 weeks, they're triple the cost.
1.5 weeks right now.
Yeah, I mean,
1.5 weeks. That's insane.
Yeah.
We got a 15-ton DOAS showing up in a week and a half right now from a call. And that you know, they didn't care about the price.
Yeah.
I was like, first of all, they're a pretty good price. Second of all, it's going to be there in a week and a half. And that was what I was talking earlier about.
The commissioning is easy, the setup and everything.
They do startup, they do commissioning. They take care of the whole damn thing.
It's so funny. I think, like I told you, I got a little burned out on construction. I do think what pushed me over the edge was when you couldn't get anything, right? Solving problems is fun, right?
Yeah.
But when the only problem I solved every single day is like, yeah, we can't get that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like, this is getting exhausting. And I actually think I can't prove this, but this is my own
conspiracy
theory.
This
is my own gut feeling. Is like, before everything went crazy, right? If a subcontractor or supplier, they got an increase from their vendor, they would push back, they would help you, right? But because of things like lumber that truly went crazy, right? It became acceptable to just say, sorry, cost more.
Oh,
and every single person was doing that to you every single day. And it was like, this is exhausting. Like, I am so tired of fighting this fight over and over again.
Yeah.
Must be nice to be able to say, sorry, we're like 80 weeks backed up and there's nothing we could do about it.
I mean, it's like a small piece of it. I used to make the joke, like, holiday, right? Like, you start ordering things and asking about lead times on like October 15th. And people are like, well, we can't confirm anything because of the holidays. I'm like, what fucking holiday is October 15th?
We can either confirm or no.
Halloween is really backing up your,
Yeah, Columbus Day or something.
Yeah, we're probably all taking all of October off for Halloween. So
COVID became this giant, like, COVID, can't get it. Cost more. Can't get it. Cost more. And it's like, yeah, this is getting old.
Yeah, that was 4 years ago. It's like, come on, can we get back to regular scheduled programming here?
It seems like it's starting to feel a little bit more normal. Lead times are starting to kind of compress. I mean, how much of that in the pricing? That's what's difficult with what you guys are after, is you're trying to figure out a way to get schematic level pricing, but you have this giant recent historical data bump of COVID.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of, like, in general in estimating, and then also with the software, Zabel, that I'm with now, the machine, the software doesn't do it for you, right? It still requires a human. And so you got to know, if I'm going to use 123 Main Street as a comp, that was in the height of COVID, right? So maybe I'm going to put a negative escalation on that because everything's kind of come back to earth.
Yeah. Understanding the inputs, how they affect the outputs.
Yeah.
It's wild, man. And I go back to, this feels a lot like estimating to me feels a lot like what it's like to calculate the HVAC load. If any of y'all GCs out there feel like estimating is a pure guess, then that's what it's like to be a mechanical engineer selecting your equipment, because it's literally a fucking guess. Like, we are just totally guessing.
You might have to edit that out if you guys want to keep getting business.
No, I'll have every damn engineer in here confirm that. We are literally guessing that what you're telling us is true, that the weather will be predictable, that like all of these myriad of things will work. And then on top of that, we're being pressed to make it cheaper, which means when you make something cheaper in the mechanical engineering world, what that means is you're able to deal with less variability. So if it's cheaper, you can now only deal with 65% of the year. Cheaper now 50% of the year. Cheaper now 40% of the year. As you make it cheaper, you're saying to yourself, I'm capable of dealing with less variability of load.
Yeah.
Period. And when we make our guess, which is totally a guess, I'll own it because I don't think an engineer that's worth their salt will not admit that it's pure. I don't care, ASHRAE 62.1. I don't care what you think. It's a guess.
Heard
We
it
all
here
know
first,
that.
folks.
You heard it here. It's a fucking guess.
ASHRAE's
And
a
you're
lie.
guessing. ASHRAE's a lie. Respect ASHRAE. But y'all even know it's a guess. We're guessing that these things will be true for 15 years, which is the life cycle of your average HVAC per ASHRAE standards. So we're saying it's going to be this way for 15 years.
Yeah.
And so actually what you're buying down is your ability to handle a percentage of variability throughout the year. So as you remove dollars, you're removing your ability to handle that variability. Now you're at 65, 50, 45. If you want to get 100%, you never will. There's not enough money that could buy that.
Yeah.
95%. All right. Now we're talking, let's just say $1 million of HVAC. Well, when you make that $1 million down to $250,000, now you can deal with being comfortable 35% of the year. And that's kind of, I don't know how to express that to folks except through a long form podcast that some people may pay attention to, you know, that's what's happening when you make it cheaper.
Have you ever had a structural engineer on the podcast?
We have
recently.
Yeah. The first
they
episode.
may be the only ones
Todd
that have it
Burge.
tougher than you. Cause I'll tell you what, we call them all the time. Like, can't you make this cheaper and still guarantee the building doesn't fall down?
People don't fall through.
And also, I think
ship
I don't know for sure. I think they go to jail if the bell falls down. But like, we're like, just no, we can hold this up with a 2x4. Come on.
Todd was on the first episode.
Evolve engineer.
Evolve. Yeah. Shout out to Todd. He's a great guy. He's an awesome dude, and he will be closing the season with us as well. He you know,
Where at the common house again?
well, if the common house doesn't think it's too extra
Too wacky.
to put lights up in there, common house, come on, then we'll close him with his office. But
Nice.
I think because he's a structural, I was trying to dig in a little bit, and he was a little, it's hard to answer these kind of questions, especially on a podcast, because there's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I respect that because it's huge. It's like, well, I don't know, I'm trying to dig in a little bit, and we kept it at a higher level of just like the approach to general culture, and which also is important to design, being comfortable with being able to express yourself in a community of other people, which we impact. But from a structural engineer, I'd like to dive deeper, specifically on structural. What kind of pressures?
They have a hard job.
Yeah. What does that look? What kind of questions do you ask them on a regular basis?
So like, this is the best analogy I can come up with, right? There would be a scenario where we would be sitting down with a client, talking to them about, hey, here's the budget. Hey, you wanted me to price out this feature wall. It's going to be about $5,000. And this is, they would say,
how'd you do that?
They would say, no, this is when it's designed, right? Oh, I got it priced up at $5,000. That seems expensive. Based on what?
Yeah.
Based on you made up $1,000 in your head, based on your experience, blah, blah. I only had one scenario. I can't remember what project it was. I only ever had one scenario where the architect said, seems expensive because I put that same exact flooring that we want to put on the wall in my office. And I'm like, well, that's a really good reason. Let me dig into that for you. But most people just say, seems expensive. And I think that, myself included, right? Any structural engineers out there, I'm apologizing now. I would get this like detail and I'd be like, this is too much, too beefed. This is over designed, over engineering.
Yo, where's the fucking?
And again, like I'm saying that with what qualification? None. And the same thing happens. Like the same thing would happen now. It's the same thing I do now in my new world, right? I've worked for a software company, and now I'm lucky where I have direct access to the engineers, the people that build the software, right? Different type of engineer. This guy Tyson, he's awesome, and I'm so guilty of like, hey, I talked to this prospective client, and they made this suggestion. Shouldn't that be easy to change? Based on what coding experience that I have, could I ever make that comment?
It's just
right?
a minor change.
Yeah.
Every single revision request we get is a minor change.
Yeah.
That's there's a well, if anything, we're unpacking the idea that we all just have different perspectives, which is the spirit of this in general, like which in having somebody from the software world that's previously been a GC, that's been incredible too. We have, what is it like? Who is your? I mean, I guess you're targeting trades and GCs, that kind of stuff, to try to get there, or estimating firms as well. People RS means is potentially a competitor. Maybe?
No, not really. I mean, since we're taking people's actual cost data, right? To date, our marketing has been very much to multifamily developers and multifamily general contractors. We're actually, I have no idea when this is gonna like air, this episode, so maybe I'm announcing this too soon, but whatever. If it happens, it happens. We're going to a conference in about 3 weeks where we're going to announce that our software's got the ability to now do other types of projects, restaurants, offices, and not just so multifamily focused.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
but our main target, I would say, is GCs and GCs and developers. And then as we continue to roll out new features and march towards being a full pre-construction platform, I think that it'll shift more towards the GC world.
I'll have to talk to your nerd engineers and just see where their minds are. We have software team as well at PermaZip, and we do some stuff. But there's a lot of questions I have, and yeah, exactly. Carter just said instant quote collab for sure.
Yeah, sounds perfect.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things we could be talking about with what the data we have is. We've been exploring, for example, the idea that we have an instant quote. So we're getting data as inputs from users.
Mhm.
We're producing a price for them. And if we were to then correlate that estimation to the effort, the real hours that we also clock in Hubstaff for each of these projects, there's a way we could start training models of what is the real engineering effort for these kinds of things, restaurants or this stuff that you guys are pricing, that you could get better estimations of the engineering data. Also, better estimations of tonnages, this kind of things based on the real engineering data we use, which is based on ASHRAE. I know ASHRAE, I was giving you hell earlier, but ASHRAE is a great organization, and we use their historic data to make estimations of tonnages. And we're trying to get Captive Air on here. Captive Air folks, if y'all are listening, go ahead and get up on here, because we have a lead on like their senior like chief engineer guy that we might be able to do a setup at their thing. The idea here is just like blow the whole industry wide open and just get us all talking about some real things, which you guys are doing with estimating, what engineers are nerding out behind the scenes on, what architects, what their perspective is, and just giving some folks like legitimately some behind the scenes action of where are our conflicts? How do we resolve things? Like, how do we make this better? But yeah, we should definitely collaborate with your engineers. So what is it? I think you said Hamid?
Hamid's the CEO.
Hamid's the CEO?
Yeah.
Tyson.
And Tyson's the lead engineer.
Tyson? Okay. Tyson, I'm the
he's
nerd.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm that nerd.
Yeah.
Let's talk about where we're at right now too. Shout out to Vail Brewing for letting us set up this.
Oh yeah.
Super low key, high key.
Yeah.
1509 Belleville.
Yeah.
Right?
1509 Belleville.
Vail.
Yep.
Which Chris was working on when
I did the first 70% of this project. So
yes. So the hard work.
And then Zip and Folsom Singh design collaboration.
Yeah, FSA, Folsom Singh have been on here, and too bad we don't have the wide angle so you can see these fun lights that we got. But luckily on Chris's shot, you can see the sweet. This is what we would call a feature wall.
Couple dedicated circuits for there.
I don't know what I budgeted for that feature wall, but I'm sure it wasn't enough. Sorry, Dave.
All right, how do we find you on the internets?
On the internets, just search my name on LinkedIn. I think that's about all I got. I'm not one of the cool kids that's got all that other stuff.
We'll put you up there.
And all this stuff.
I'll set up a TikTok account if this takes off.
And we'll put links to Zabel as well. So appreciate y'all coming out here. Thanks to Vail Brewery for having us. We'll see y'all next time.
All right.
Thanks, guys.